were living at Harcourt Drive, 55 Harcourt Drive, and that was the upper end of the drive, near the cricket ground. Well, I can remember we went to bed quite early. We were conscious of sirens and the siren going and the planes flying over. And then there was a case where I think my mother realised she'd better get us out of bed. So we were already asleep at the time, and I can remember coming down the stairs and the stairs absolutely shaking as we came down. But however, we got down anyway, and they were, I think possibly my mother was listening to the wireless as it was then, and listening to hear what they were advising us to do. And they were advising everybody, or whoever wanted to go under the stairs might be the safest place to be. And we went there, and because there was no light under our stairs, Roy panicked. He was only 4 at the time, so he panicked, and my mother had to bring him out. We couldn't stay under the stairs. So then she brought the table out, because that was another thing they were telling us to do. And she brought the table out. So we all sat under the table, and she had Roy on her knee and was reading to us to keep us as calm as possible. Now, then shortly after that, the whole house seemed to shake. And before too long, the house just collapsed and we were in it. Now, I managed myself to be able to get out, and I shouted for my mum to come on. I said, come on, mummy. And she said to me, you shout for help. Go out and shout for help. And she was buried under rubble, and Roy was buried. He was blown actually off her knee, and she didn't know where he was, but she could hear the wee cry, and she was telling me to shout for help, which I did. And I don't know whether it was an air raid warden, but he had a helmet on. I can remember that. And I said, help my mummy. And he came in and managed to get my mum out and brought her out, but she'd only half a dress, because her dress was left, half of her dress was left under the rubble. And as I kept shouting, mummy, come on, she was saying, no, I think it was the air raid warden said to her to come and, to come on to, to bring me on out. And she said, but I'm not going without my son. And he shouted, mummy, don't leave me. He was frightened, you see. I mean, they could still hear his voice. And so when we got out, eventually out onto the street, the air raid wardens were shouting, drop, because the planes were coming over. The flares were lighting up the whole sky, and we had to drop, and my mother had to drop on top of me. Now, the air raid warden was very good. He said, I'll hold on to your little boy, and he kept Roy in his arms. But the only thing that Roy can remember, and he was only 4, he can remember the man putting him on the ground and lying on top of him, because we couldn't have any movement, and we all had to fall down on the ground, and my mother lay on top of me, and the man who had Roy lay on top of him. So we were going down the drive, and when we got to the bottom, we were put into this house down in Rosapenna, I think it was. And we were there for a short space of time while we were waiting for ambulances to take us down to the Jaffa school. We didn't know where we were going actually at that time, but that's where we ended up. Then when we got down to the Jaffa, well, before that, when we went into this house, somebody opened one of the doors and discovered there was a fire at the back of the house. So we had to all get out of it. I mean, just anybody who could fit into the house was put in there. And but then whenever the fire started at the back of the house, we all had to get out again. And there were a fleet of ambulances, but they weren't like ambulances as we know them. There were ambulances for putting stretchers in, you know. But however, I suppose they were all taken out and then they packed everybody in. And we went down to the Jaffa school, and while we were there, there was, I think it was Red Cross or St. John's ambulance, and they were there giving out tea and drinks to everybody. And we were sitting on top of their desks because the floor was wet with a pipe had burst or something. We were there for a short space of time whenever the police came in and said we had to get out because a landmine was at the back of the school and hadn't gone off. But this, one of the wardens, the area warden I think, went out onto the Cliftonville Road and stopped all the cars that were going up the Cliftonville Road and asking them if they could take people up to the girls' model school. So that's where we ended up, in the girls' model school. Well then, my dad didn't know where we were. You see, he came home from duty, hadn't a clue where we were. Saw the house destroyed, didn't know what had happened, whether we were buried underneath, whether we got out. And then I suppose somebody had told him that people were moved down to wherever. And then he came up and he had gone round, I think, the different classes and then came across us. So he was relieved at that, I think. And it was the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry. He was so relieved.